I sat there, humiliated, like a child being scolded in public, except the one scolding me was my daughter, and I was 73. The room had gone awkwardly quiet. Laughter from another table filled the silence, but at hours, it just hung there, stale and uncomfortable. I looked down at the half-eaten cupcake on my plate and tried to pretend I didn't hear her tone, but everyone else had. I could feel their eyes on me, curious, embarrassed, amused. "Please, Mom, don't embarrass me in front of my friends," Kaya said, with a forced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Her voice was sharp, even though she tried to soften it. She leaned in just enough so only our table could hear, but not so quietly that the judgment didn't carry. All I had done was share a story from when she was 9 years old, something innocent, something sweet, about how she used to insist on wearing mismatched socks to school because she thought they made her run faster. I thought it was funny. I thought it made her real. Apparently, I was wrong. Kaya let out a little sigh and turned back to her coworkers like she had just swatted away a buzzing mosquito. That's what I was to her in that moment, an inconvenience. So I stayed silent. I sat there while they went back to talking about office politics and gym routines and vacation plans. I sipped my water. I smiled politely. I waited for the polite excuse to leave. I counted the seconds, but inside I was crumbling, because this wasn't the first time she had done this. The words were new, but the feeling wasn't. I'd felt it last Christmas when she forgot to pick me up from the airport and sent a rideshare instead. I felt it on her birthday when she introduced me as just my mom visiting from Asheville, like I was a distant relative who showed up uninvited. And now, here I was again, at a company family mixer that she graciously allowed me to attend, just to shut me down in front of people who didn't even know my name. And the thing is, I didn't want to be the center of attention. I didn't want to steal her spotlight or be anyone's burden. I just wanted to feel included, a part of her life, like I mattered. I looked around the room, decorated with balloons and branded tote bags. People were mingling, taking photos in front of the step and repeat banner, laughing with wine in hand. It was a different world, Kaya's world, one she had built with ambition, hard work, and clearly a version of her past she didn't want to acknowledge. I was a wrinkle in her narrative, a reminder of simpler times she now found embarrassing. I smiled again, more to myself than anyone else, and folded the paper napkin in my lap. Neat square, pressed edges. That's what I always did when I didn't know how to react. Just gave my hands something to do. "Excuse me," I whispered, standing slowly. Kaya didn't look up. One of her coworkers gave me a pity smile. That made it worse. I walked to the restroom, locked the door behind me, and just stood there, staring at myself in the mirror. I looked tired. My blouse was wrinkled from the drive. I had tried to wear something nice, something young. I even wore a touch of blush. For her, I wanted to make her proud. What I saw staring back at me was a mother who raised a daughter who had outgrown her and maybe resented her. I didn't cry. I just stood there, letting the hum of the fluorescent light fill the silence. That moment became one I would replay over and over in my head for days to come. I could have snapped back. I could have said, "You know what embarrasses me, Kaya? That I raised a daughter who's ashamed of her own mother." But I didn't. I stayed silent. Not because I was weak, not because I was afraid. I stayed silent because I still loved her, even when it hurt. And I had no idea that the very next morning, the silence I gave her would become the loudest thing she'd ever hear. When her secret came out at work, People always say your children will grow up to reflect how you raised them. I used to believe that too. My name is Marjorie Ellen Carter, and I've lived in Asheville, North Carolina, my whole life. I was an English teacher for 31 years, loved poetry, Shakespeare, the smell of old books, and the way a teenager's eyes would light up when they finally got something. My husband, John, passed away 10 years ago, heart attack in his sleep. He was a quiet man with big hands and gentle eyes, a carpenter by trade, but he could fix just about anything except the hole his death left in my world. After John died, it was just me and Kaya, my only daughter, my everything. She was always bright, curious, headstrong. When she was little, she'd crawl into bed with me during thunderstorms and say, "Don't worry, Mommy, I'll protect you." Even then, she wanted to be the strong one. I worked double shifts, tutoring and grading papers, just to make sure she could have dance lessons, after-school programs, anything she needed. And when it came time for college, I sold John's old truck and took out a small second mortgage so she could go without debt. She got her degree in human resources management, then quickly moved up the ladder in a growing tech firm in Raleigh. She's 38 now, polished, poised, and successful, always dressed like she's ready for a board meeting, even on Sundays. When people meet her, they say, "Wow, she must have had a great upbringing." I used to take pride in that. But in the last 5 years, something shifted. She started talking to me less, visiting less. The phone calls turned from long, giggling check-ins to clipped, efficient updates. She'd say things like, "I'm just so busy, Mom," or, "You know how it is." She called me old-fashioned more than once. Once, during dinner, I mentioned something about needing help with my email. She rolled her eyes and said, "You really need to learn how to do this stuff yourself." She wasn't cruel, just distant, controlled, like she was always afraid I'd say the wrong thing at the wrong time. I excused it. I told myself she was tired, overworked, pressured. I chalked it up to generational differences. But deep down, I was afraid of the truth, that my presence embarrassed her. Still, when she invited me to her company's Family Appreciation Mixer, I was hopeful. I thought, maybe this is her trying. Maybe she wants to include me again. Maybe she misses me. I baked lemon bars from her favorite childhood recipe and drove the 4 hours to Raleigh with a cardigan folded neatly in the passenger seat. She met me outside her apartment, arms crossed, AirPods in, no hug, just a quick, "We're running a bit late. Let's go." The mixer was at a rooftop lounge. Glass walls, catered hors d'oeuvres, those little drinks with cucumber slices floating in them. It wasn't my kind of place, but I smiled through it all. I sat next to her at the table and listened, proud as ever, as her coworkers complimented her leadership, her poise, her organizational skills. And when one of them asked what Kaya was like as a kid, I thought I'd share a story, just one little memory to show how sweet and funny she used to be. I didn't know that doing so would push her so far. What I also didn't know, what I couldn't have known, is that while I was sitting there, feeling like an outsider in my daughter's world, she had already pulled me into something I never asked to be part of. She had used me, and the next morning, that truth would unravel everything I thought I understood about our relationship. It happened so fast, I didn't even realize it was meant to hurt until it was too late. We were about 45 minutes into the company mixer. Kaya had just finished introducing me to a group of her colleagues, very briefly, almost like I was an afterthought. "This is my mom," she said. No Marjorie, no warmth, no pride, just a flat sentence. I smiled and shook hands, trying to mask the sinking feeling in my stomach. They asked polite questions. Did you drive far? Are you staying long? The usual. Then someone, a woman named Chelsea, I think, asked Kaya what she was like growing up. She laughed and said, "Oh, I bet there were stories." I saw it as a light-hearted opening. So I chimed in. I said, Kaya was the only kid I knew who wore mismatched socks to school every day for an entire year. She believed the red one made her brain smarter and the blue one made her legs faster. It was sweet, honest, the kind of memory that makes people smile. And a few people did, soft chuckles, a couple of awes. But not Kaya. Her face turned stiff. Like I just told them, she wet the bed until she was 12. She leaned toward me, her lips still curved in that frozen smile, and whispered under her breath, but just loud enough for everyone at our table to hear. "Please, Mom, don't embarrass me in front of my friends." I froze. Her tone wasn't playful. It was curt, sharp, not like a daughter correcting her mother, but like a manager reprimanding an employee. There was a pause at the table. One of her co-workers laughed nervously and took a sip of wine. Another one checked her phone. I looked at Kaya, my daughter, the little girl who once made me a Mother's Day card out of dryer sheets and glitter glue, and all I could see now was distance. Not miles, not time, but something colder, something like shame. "I'm sorry," I murmured, though I didn't know what I was apologizing for. Kaya didn't respond. She turned back to her friends and jumped into a conversation about someone's promotion. And just like that, I was dismissed. I sat silently for the rest of the evening, picking at the lemon bar I had brought from home. No one touched it. No one even asked what it was. At one point, Kaya got up to take photos with her team. She didn't ask me to join. I watched from the corner, clapping politely when someone made a joke, smiling, even though I felt like vanishing into the wallpaper. I wasn't supposed to be seen. Not really. I was the supporting cast in the play she was directing, the wise old mother character, meant to nod, sit straight, and keep quiet until it was time to go. And that's exactly what I did. But something broke in me that night. Not loudly, not all at once. It broke in small, quiet ways. In the way I folded my napkin 4 times before setting it down. In the way I kept glancing at the door, wondering how early was too early to leave. In the way I avoided looking at anyone's eyes as I stood up to excuse myself. She didn't even notice when I left the table. I slipped into the restroom like I was disappearing into another version of myself, one that didn't feel humiliated, erased, or uninvited in her own child's life. Standing in front of the mirror, I didn't see the woman I used to be, the one who stayed up late editing Kaya's college essays, who taught her how to bake banana bread, who cheered at every school concert even when Kaya forgot the words. I saw someone small, someone tolerated, but what I didn't see, not yet, was the deeper betrayal. Because this wasn't just about a comment at a party. This wasn't just a moment of embarrassment. The next morning, I would learn that Kaya hadn't just pushed me aside socially. She had used me professionally, legally, and selfishly, and I had unknowingly walked into a trap built out of lies, with my name written all over it. I couldn't sleep that night. Back at Kaya's apartment, everything felt too still, too perfect, the kind of home that looked like it had been staged for a magazine shoot. Cold gray tones, smooth counters, every object in its place. Not a trace of family anywhere. Not a single picture of her childhood. Not even one of us. I lay on the guest bed, fully dressed, staring up at the ceiling fan, turning in slow, deliberate circles. My suitcase sat unopened at the foot of the bed. I had only planned to stay the weekend. But suddenly, I couldn't imagine staying through mourning. It wasn't just what Kaya said. It was how easily she'd said it. The quickness of her dismissal. The way she looked at me like a cracked antique vase she couldn't quite throw out, but certainly didn't want to show off either. And the worst part? I didn't get angry. Not right away. I got quiet. I tried to excuse it in my mind. Maybe she was stressed. Maybe she was trying to impress someone. Maybe she didn't realize how it sounded. But I knew she did. Kaya is a professional communicator. She knows the power of words. She's built her whole career on choosing exactly the right ones. And tonight, she chose to shrink me. I got up and walked to the little desk in the corner, opened my phone, and scrolled back through old photos. I needed to remember something good, something true. There she was, Kaya, at age 6, beaming in a lopsided fairy costume we made together, out of fabric scraps and glitter, her front teeth missing, her cheeks full of light. I tapped the video beside it. She was twirling in our old living room, yelling, "I'm magical, Mommy!" As her wings flopped off one shoulder, I laughed through my nose. Then felt the tears slip down before I could stop them. How did we get here? I used to be her safe place, her whole world. Now, I was a liability at a work party. The next morning, I was supposed to join her for brunch, but I couldn't imagine sitting across from her, smiling through eggs and coffee like everything was fine. I needed space. I needed clarity. So I went out for a walk around the block before she even woke up. Raleigh was cool and misty that morning. The sky smeared with soft gray light, the kind of weather that always made me miss John. He would have known what to say. He would have reminded me who I was, how much I gave to her. He would have put a hand on my shoulder and said, "Margie, you didn't raise her to be this unkind. She chose this." That was the thing, though. I had raised her to be strong, to speak her mind, to never settle for less than what she deserved. But I never imagined she'd use that strength to cut away from me entirely. Back in the apartment, I poured myself a cup of coffee. Kaya was still asleep. Her pristine kitchen was spotless, every surface gleaming like glass. I reached into my purse and pulled out a little envelope I'd brought with me. Inside was a card I'd meant to give her at brunch. Just a simple, "I'm proud of you" note, handwritten, thoughtful, my way of reminding her that no matter how far she drifted, I was always rooting for her. I slid it back into my bag. Something had changed. I glanced at the mail on her counter, just to tidy up. I wasn't snooping. I just didn't want to leave her apartment looking messy. But that's when I saw it. A letter with her company's letterhead, partially opened. My eyes caught my own name on it before I even realized what I was reading. And with that one glance, the quiet ache of the night before turned into something entirely different. Not hurt, not confusion, but realization. Kaya hadn't just embarrassed me. She had used me, my name, my identity, my history, for something far worse. And whether she knew it or not, she had just opened the door to a reckoning I never wanted, but could no longer avoid. At first, I didn't even mean to read it. The letter was just sitting there on the kitchen counter, half open, a few sheets tucked into a company envelope, marked Private and Confidential, HR Division. I noticed my name before anything else. Marjorie Ellen Carter. In bold, underlined. That stopped me cold. I held my breath as I slid the paper out, carefully, trying not to wrinkle it. I read the first line, once, then again. Then I sat down at the kitchen island because my knees suddenly didn't feel strong enough to hold me. It was a formal letter from Kaya's company, her human resources department. It was addressed to her directly and referenced a disciplinary action under internal review. The cause? Falsifying medical caregiver documentation. My name was listed as the dependent she claimed to be caring for, apparently on multiple occasions. The letter detailed how she had requested leave under the Family Medical Leave Act, citing ongoing medical treatments for her elderly mother. Me. She had used me. She had written down dates, locations, even listed 2 hospitals I'd never even stepped foot in. Claimed she was driving me to appointments, managing my medications, attending family therapy sessions. There were even reimbursement requests, meal expenses, mileage logs, time away from work, all of it built on a lie. And the most chilling part? It wasn't a one-time mistake. This wasn't a clerical error. This was a pattern, a paper trail carefully constructed over 8 months. I felt my stomach twist as the reality settled in. She had taken my name, my age, my vulnerability, and turned it into a cover story. To get time off, to justify her absences, to make herself look like a good daughter, a selfless caregiver. And I had no idea. I looked around her spotless kitchen, and suddenly, it felt artificial, like a showroom, a perfect set designed to support a version of her life that simply wasn't real. I walked over to the dining table, where she kept a little printer and office supplies. My hands were shaking as I quietly made a copy of the letter. I didn't know why I did it, not yet, but some deep part of me, the part that had raised a daughter through hardship and heartbreak, told me this wasn't something I could pretend to unsee. I placed the original back exactly where it was, careful not to move anything else. I sat down again, letter in hand, and just stared at it. And here's what hit me the hardest. She didn't even think I'd notice. That's how sure she was. I'd stay quiet, stay small, stay the version of myself she could ignore. But something shifted in that moment. Not anger, not vengeance, something quieter, clearer. It was like the fog lifted, and I could finally see her for who she really was. Not the daughter I once carried, but the woman she had become. And I remembered something my late husband John once said to me during the hardest part of our marriage. Back when we were barely scraping by, working weekends, eating peanut butter for dinner, he said, "Margie, being quiet doesn't mean you're powerless. It just means you haven't decided yet." That morning, sitting in my daughter's kitchen, with evidence of her lie in my hands, I decided I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to act, not out of revenge, but out of truth, because I may have been silent at that mixer. I may have smiled through the sting, but now I held something stronger than shame. I held proof, and for the first time in a long time, I remembered who I was. Not a burden, not a prop, not a woman to be pitied, but a mother, a widow, a woman with nothing left to lose, and every right to reclaim her name. I left the letter right where I found it. Didn't say a word to Kaya that morning. I just watched her breeze through the kitchen, acting like nothing had happened, pouring oat milk into her coffee, checking her phone, smiling at her reflection in the microwave, like she was practicing for a meeting. She was dressed for brunch, pencil skirt, blazer, perfect, always perfect. She didn't even ask how I slept. I told her I wasn't feeling well and needed to head home early. Her response? "Oh, okay, well, drive safe, I guess." Not a hug, not a question, not even a "feel better." She didn't walk me to the door, and that was fine. I didn't need a goodbye. What I needed now was clarity and a plan. I drove the 4 hours back to Asheville with the letter folded neatly in the side pocket of my purse, wrapped inside a grocery receipt like a secret. The mountains came into view as the afternoon light shifted, and for the first time in a while, I didn't cry when I got home. I didn't feel broken anymore. I felt focused, The first thing I did was call Gloria, a close friend of mine who used to work as a nurse administrator and is now a part-time notary. She's sharp, discreet, and fiercely loyal. She also doesn't ask questions unless you invite them. "Gloria," I said, "I need to come by with something, and I need you to help me write an official statement." I brought the copied letter and sat at her kitchen table while she read it, her expression darkening with each paragraph. "She used your medical condition?" she asked, quietly. "She used my non-existent medical condition," I said. We spent the next hour drafting a notarized affidavit. Gloria helped me word it professionally, clearly stating that I had not received any of the treatments listed in Kaya's documentation, had not been in her care, and had no knowledge of any leave of absence filed on my behalf. We signed and dated it. She notarized it. Then I made 5 copies. That night, I sat down with my old laptop, the one John used to call the dinosaur, and searched Kaya's company online. I found their ethics and compliance contact. I found their anonymous tip line. I found an email address connected to internal audit reviews. I didn't send anything yet. Not because I was unsure, but because I wanted to be careful. Because the truth is, when someone lies this boldly, when someone commits fraud using their own mother as a prop, they're not going to go down quietly. They're going to deny, twist, manipulate. So I began thinking 2 steps ahead. I called my lawyer, Mr. Denton. He's semi-retired now, but still sharp as a tack. He helped me and John draft our wills years ago. I told him what I found. I asked him what kind of exposure I might have if Kaya's actions ever escalated. He assured me that as long as I hadn't signed or knowingly participated, I wasn't legally vulnerable. But he did suggest creating a record, a timeline of what I found, when, and how I responded. That was the moment I began building what he called a wall of truth. I pulled my medical records. They showed no visits, no treatments, no medications. Just a healthy 73-year-old with strong blood pressure and a fondness for ginger tea. I printed those out. I documented the day I found the letter, the time, the exact words I remembered. I recorded a video of myself explaining what had happened, speaking calmly, clearly, and without anger, just the facts. Because this wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about punishment. It was about reclaiming my story. I had stayed silent for so long, not just that night at the mixer, but for years. I had let Kaya define who I was in her world, a side character, an old woman, an embarrassment. But not anymore. Now I was documenting. I was preparing. And the next time Kaya looked me in the eye, she wouldn't be looking at a silent woman afraid to speak. She'd be looking at someone who knew exactly what she was doing and exactly what needed to come next. 3 days later, I mailed the envelope. It was simple. No return address, no note. Just a clean manila envelope addressed to the Ethics Review Office of Kaya's company. Inside, a copy of the HR warning letter, my notarized affidavit, and my full medical records. Everything laid out clearly, professionally. I sent it from the small post office 2 towns over, not to be secretive, but because I wanted the distance. I didn't want it traced back to my routine post office, where people knew me. This wasn't about causing a stir in my little circle. This was about setting a record straight, where it counted. I also sent an identical package to the head of human resources. No threats, no accusations. Just the truth, documented and clear. Then I returned to my quiet life. I went to the library. I read in the park. I watered the lilies in John's garden and finally pruned the overgrown hedge I'd been ignoring all spring. I didn't call Kaya. I didn't warn her, because she had made her choices in silence. So would I. The only thing I left behind, intentionally, was a small note. On the day I left her apartment, before driving back home, I placed a yellow sticky note on top of the company letter she'd left out. It read, "Be careful what you leave lying around. Some things belong to people who still remember the truth." I never signed it. I didn't need to. The response came quicker than I expected. 5 days later, she called me. Not texted, not emailed. She called. Something she hadn't done in weeks. Her voice was tight, rushed. "Mom, did you send something to my company?" There it was. No small talk. No warm-up. "I did," I said calmly. "I sent them the truth." There was a pause, so long, I thought the line had dropped. "You don't understand what you've done," she said finally. "This could cost me everything." "I understand exactly what I've done," I said. "I chose not to be used," she stammered. Then her tone shifted, smoother, more measured. "Mom, listen. Things got complicated. I was under pressure. I thought if I cut her off, gently. "You thought I wouldn't notice, or worse, you thought I would, and I'd stay quiet." She didn't respond. Then came the emotional pivot, the one I expected. "I was doing it for us. You're not getting younger, Mom. I thought if I could just take the leave, regroup, move up, I could afford to move you closer, maybe get you some better care." "Better care?" I laughed softly. "I volunteer at the library 3 days a week, Kaya. I walk 5 miles a day. What kind of care do you think I need?" Silence again. This time, shame. The old me might have tried to soothe her. Might have said, "I know you meant well," or, "It's okay." But not this time. "I'm not your excuse," I said firmly. "Not your prop. Not your story to bend when life gets uncomfortable." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "So what now?" "Now," I said, "you face the truth, the way I had to face your silence." There was nothing cruel in my voice. No heat, just clarity. "I'm not coming after you, Kaya. I don't want money. I don't want revenge. But I will not be erased. Not by you, not by anyone." She tried again, offered to fix this. Maybe, get ahead of the narrative. Words that told me she was still playing damage control, not offering real remorse. But I didn't need anything from her anymore. The power had already shifted. Because the moment I mailed that envelope, I stopped being her cover, and I started being someone she had to account for. It didn't take long. 2 weeks after I sent the envelope, I received a certified letter from Kaya's company. Not addressed to her, addressed to me. It confirmed receipt of the materials I submitted. It thanked me for cooperating with an ongoing internal investigation and assured me that appropriate disciplinary measures were underway. It ended with a note that I might be contacted again for further clarification. I never heard from them again, but I did hear from Kaya more than once. The first call was panicked. She cried, not sobs of grief, more like frustration, disbelief, fear. "They're putting me on leave," she said. "Pending review. I could lose my position, Mom. I built everything." I didn't say much, just listened. She paused, then tried another angle. "You could tell them it was a misunderstanding. Just say you weren't sure what you signed, that we confused things." "I didn't sign anything, Kaya," I said calmly. "That's the point." She hung up. 2 days later, she texted. Something about lawyers, something about legal exposure, and family misunderstandings. A soft threat, buried under polite phrasing. I didn't reply. Then came the voicemail, quieter, sadder. "Mom, I know I messed up. I wasn't trying to hurt you. I was drowning, and I didn't know how to ask for help without making myself look weak." That voicemail broke something in me. Not my resolve, just the last little thread of who I thought she still was. Because it wasn't about weakness. It was about honesty. about respect, about choosing me not just when it was convenient, but when it mattered. A few days later, I got a letter in the mail, handwritten, neatly folded in pale pink stationery. Inside, Kaya apologized. In vague terms, said she was stepping down voluntarily from her position, that she needed time to recenter and reflect, that she hoped I could find it in my heart to forgive her. I read it once. Then I put it in a drawer, not to forget, but to remember. Because here's what forgiveness looks like at 73. It's not a big speech. It's not a tearful reunion. It's a boundary, drawn gently but firmly in the sand. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want to see her ruined. I just wanted to be free. From her lies, from her shame, from the guilt I'd carried, like an old suitcase that didn't even belong to me. The last time we spoke, really spoke, was 3 weeks later. She showed up at my house unannounced. No call, no warning, just standing on my porch with a tight smile and tired eyes. She looked smaller, not physically, but emotionally, like the air had finally gone out of the image she'd built around herself. "Hi, Mom," she said. "Kaya," I replied. We stood there for a moment. The wind rustled the dogwood tree John planted decades ago. "I just wanted to say, I know you probably hate me right now," she said. "And I don't blame you." I looked at her. My daughter, my once little girl with the mismatched socks and glitter wings. "I don't hate you," I said. "I just don't recognize you." She looked down, swallowed. "No excuses this time. I'm going to fix things," she whispered. "I hope you do," I replied. "But you'll have to do it without me pretending everything's okay." And then I closed the door. Not angrily, not cruelly, just with the peace of someone who had finally chosen herself. It's been 6 months since I closed the door. I haven't seen Kaya since that day on the porch. She sent a few more messages. I didn't respond. Not because I'm angry. Truthfully, I'm not. The anger passed like a summer storm. Loud at first, then gone. What was left behind wasn't rage. It was peace. People don't talk enough about what it feels like to reclaim your life in your 70s. Everyone assumes you've either settled into your habits or you're too tired to change. But I'll tell you something. Nothing sharpens your sense of self like being betrayed by someone you raised. Because once you survive that, you stop apologizing for existing. I still live in the same townhome in Asheville. Same creaky floorboards. Same front porch where I drink my tea each morning and talk to John in the silence. But everything else has changed. I volunteer twice a week at the public library now, helping immigrant women with their English. They call me Miss Margie. They bring me homemade food, write little thank you cards with sparkles and ribbon, and every time one of them learns how to write her name or reads her first storybook out loud, I feel like I'm watching something sacred. I've also started gardening again. Not because I need to, but because I want to. John's old tools are still hanging in the shed. I dusted them off one afternoon and built a raised garden bed with the help of his brother, Uncle Walt, who lives out by Black Mountain. Walt's a quiet man, like John was. He doesn't ask questions, just shows up with his toolbox and leaves with a nod. We planted tomatoes, basil, some squash. He says I've got good soil. I told him it's about time something good grew from all this. Inside, I've begun redecorating. Took down the old frames that made me feel stuck in a version of my life I no longer relate to. I didn't throw them away. I just packed them into a memory box, tucked carefully into the hall closet. One of them, the photo of Kaya at 6 years old, in that crooked fairy costume, I framed again, but this time I didn't put it on the mantle. I placed it in my reading room, next to a stack of books and a lamp. I look at it sometimes, not with sadness, but with remembrance. She was someone else back then, and so was I. I don't hate Kaya. I don't wish her harm. In some strange way, I hope this was the jolt she needed to become something better. But I also know it's no longer my responsibility to carry that hope. That's her journey now. Mine is here, with the quiet joy of choosing myself. For the first time in a long time, there's one moment I keep coming back to. A few weeks ago, I was sitting in the library, helping a young woman from Honduras fill out a job application. She stopped halfway through and looked up at me. She said, "You're so kind. You remind me of my mother." And for a second, my chest tightened. That word, mother, it used to hurt. Used to bring shame and regret and longing. But not that day. That day, it felt like an honor, because I remembered who I am. I am Marjorie Ellen Carter, a mother, a widow, a woman who stayed silent when it mattered most, and then found the strength to speak, not with noise, but with truth. And that is how I saved myself. Sometimes silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the beginning of freedom.